Alright guys, I got another Rippazine video for you here. Since today I have both Yaira number 2 and Rippazine number 3 from Rippazine Comics. And in addition to that, as you can see, I also have my Horseman t-shirt that you can see a little bit of there that I did get with this order, which this is the first t-shirt I've gotten from Rippazine. They put out a ton of shirts, but this is the first one I've actually bought. And I do like this shirt quite a bit. It is pretty comfy. But anyway, we do have 2 books to go through here today. So I think Yaira number 2 actually shipped before the Rippazine, but I'm going to go through the Rippazine first just because there's not as much to it. So this is just the standard cover of Rippazine number 3, the regular $8 variant. Which, if you're familiar with the Rippazines, this is pretty much what you've come to expect from them. It is a brief magazine, and it has many of the same segments that we've come to expect from these Rippazines. It has another segment of Lillian's hot tea and Michael's gentleman's tips. So Lillian Renashi and Michael Copper's segments. It also has a Harriet's Kitchen recipe segment with an apple pie recipe in it this time. And then it has a new segment, actually, called Catch and Kill, which is sort of like another, sort of like rumor mill kind of segment that does have some little tidbits alluding to some of the other books that have already released and some future books as well. Some little hints are hidden in there. And of course we did get another little bird's eye view comic following the pigeons, which this one isn't a full page comic like the other ones have been. It's just a little 4-panel comic at the bottom of the Catch and Kill page. But it does depict the little pigeon falling in love with one of Sydney Bloodruth's crows. So I thought that was kind of funny. But beyond that, it also has preview pages, of course, for some of the other Rippazine books. So this one has a few preview pages from Bloodruth number 1, Yaira number 2, The Great War of Separation number 1, and ASUS number 3, actually. So, at least for me personally, this was the first time that one of these Rippazines has actually had a preview for a book that I didn't already have my hands on. So, it was nice to actually get a glimpse of something that is new to me personally, since I've been keeping up with all these releases. Which, we didn't get much from ASUS 3 on this. It was basically just a short little segment where he's still escaping from the Devling cave from the end of ASUS 2, and it seems like his powers are starting to fail him for some reason. So adding another wrinkle to that plot. And then lastly, of course, we have the most important feature of these Rippazines, which is the short story. Which, just like the other 2 issues, we do have a 16-page short story included in this book that is titled Dirty Deeds, and is written by Caro Brown with art from Evan Scale. So, if you're familiar with the Rippazine and you follow some of their content on their YouTube channel, some of their streams and such, you've probably seen Caro before and are familiar with her. Which, I knew she had done some writing before, but I never read any of her work. So, this is my first time actually getting a look at her writing. Which, as always, these stories are pretty short. It's only 16 pages, so you don't get a real deep dive into anything. But it is a glimpse at something that could possibly become a full release in the future. Which, this story is about sort of a ragtag militia group called Dirty Deeds, which is a group of 6 aliens that are named Ren Lin, who apparently she's supposed to be the leader of the group, and she also has psychic powers. And then we also have Arad and Sulia Kar, who they have the same last name, so I assume they're related in some fashion, most likely siblings. Which they're 2 members of the team. Sulia is the team medic, and Arad seems to be one of their main fighters. He also has a talking sword that seemed pretty cool. So beyond that, we also had Felsiar, who's this like cat alien guy who has sort of like a Borderlands Psycho-esque mask. Then we also have this blue guy named Beetles, who is the pilot of their ship, which seems to be their main base. And then we also have this little spider-looking dude named Spingy? I'm probably mispronouncing all of these names. But he's this little spider alien guy. He's got 4 arms, and he can seemingly produce silk. And he's sort of like the team's mechanic. He repairs the ship and does things like that. So, spoiler warning, I guess, before we go through this story, but of course, as always, there isn't much story to actually go through since it's only a few pages. But what we get here is we have the Dirty Deeds crew on some unnamed planet, and they have stolen some crates full of something from a group called the Red Sun Federation, and they are currently being pursued by some guys trying to get that stuff back. So, in the middle of this, their pursuers end up just turning around and stopping following them and going back to the little city that they came from, because the city is now being attacked by a group of aliens called Lumavax, which are these insectoid alien things that are apparently killing a bunch of people and capturing some to, like, implant little insect alien babies into. So the Dirty Deeds crew ends up turning things around and going back to actually help these people. So they end up fighting off the aliens, and we get quick little glimpses at all the characters and sort of what each one's specialty is. So we get to see some cool combat from Felsiar, him going hand to hand and knife to back with some of these aliens. We get to see Beetles piloting the ship and doing some fancy maneuvers. We get to see Ren Lin showing off some of her psychic powers, where she basically goes full Code Geass Lelouch on them and, like, mind controls them into killing each other. So that was really cool. And we also get a look at Arad's sword that is apparently sentient or something. It seemed to talk, and it seemed to enjoy killing things. So this sword definitely has some more to it, and looks pretty cool. But yeah, they end up fighting off the aliens and just leaving and deciding to go back and repair their ship and get out of here to finish their mission. So just a short little story. Now, I did like this overall. It definitely had a different feel to it than the other short stories we've gotten from the Rippazines. Obviously, this is a sci-fi story. It's set on a different planet. It's a lot less grounded than the, PI stories we got from the first 2 issues. But I did enjoy what we got from this. The different characters in the Dirty Deeds group were all interesting, and I think it's actually kind of impressive that they managed to squeeze in so much characterization into so few pages. We did get a decent look at each one of their characters, at least enough to get a good idea of kind of what they're all about. Out of the 6, Ren Lin is probably my favorite, just because, a hero with psychic powers is something different, and I really think her design is cool. But overall, probably Arad and his weird talking evil sword thing is probably the most intriguing out of all of them. But yeah, I would definitely love to see more of this Dirty Deeds crew, so hopefully, like with Sersha and Salvage before them, they do end up getting a full release at some point, and we can find some more out about this team and this world and just dive more into this, because I think it really does have a lot of good story potential. But yeah, as for the Rippazine as a whole, I feel like I kind of end up saying the same things every time I talk about one of these. If you've read some of the other ones, you kind of know what to expect here already, and it pretty much is just the same standard we've gotten used to. So if you're a huge fan of the Rippaverse and you just want everything, you'll enjoy this. If you're brand new to it and you just want a cheap buy-in to sort of sample a lot of different things, this is good for you too. But ultimately, I wouldn't call it an absolute must-have if you maybe aren't as interested in this story, or you just want to save the money or whatever. It's not a definite must-buy, but if you get it, I think you'll end up enjoying it. And like I said, it is only $8 for the basic version, so low investment and enjoyable enough for what it is. So that does bring us to the main event, which is, of course, Yaira number 2. So I was looking forward to this. I really did enjoy Yaira number 1 quite a bit, so I'm glad that we finally got the follow-up to this. So, as for the book itself, this is cover A, which is, of course, the Canaan White cover. Like always, I can hardly ever turn down a Canaan White cover, because they are always fantastic. But just like with Yaira number 1, it is written by Jen and Sylvia Saska, with art by Deborah Carita. And like with the Great War of Separation #1 before it, it is the new, thinner format that we are going to get used to with the Rippaverse, where I think it's about 56 pages or thereabouts. So a bit shorter than Yaira #1, but of course in return it is a little bit cheaper. This one was only $17, which again, if you get the mass print cover, I think it's a few dollars even cheaper than that. And of course, the release schedule is being sped up in return for this as well, so we shouldn't have to wait as long for Yaira #3. So, up front, as always, my general thoughts on this book is basically if you enjoyed Yaira #1, you'll definitely enjoy this book too. Obviously, it picks up right where Yaira #1 left off, so we do get a continuation of that story. We get a ton more on the Neptune plot that was set up at the end of Yaira #1. We also get a little bit more on the Stefania side of things. Now, we don't see as much of her in this book. They kind of set up more for her to do in Yaira #3 coming later. But it does focus very heavily on the Neptune story. It features Sally Rodell / Yaira investigating the lost city of Atlantis and trying to hunt for Neptune. It also introduces a lot of new characters, some of which actually take the story in a much different direction than I was expecting things to go. So the plot is intriguing overall, and again, like pretty much every Rippaverse book, it does introduce as many questions as it does answers. So we have a lot of mysteries going forward into future issues as well. And just like with Yaira #1, the artwork and the action are absolutely fantastic in this book. There's some pretty cool fight scenes and just some really cool action sequences that really pull you in. So with all that being said, we are going to go through the story now, so as always, if you don't want to be spoiled on anything and you want to read this on your own, you have been warned. But this book does start out with a scene of Yaira back at Mount Hecla fighting with Yanessa, Yantoni, and Magus Numite, which is, what happened in the climax of Yaira #1. So we see a battle going on with all of them, and we see Yaira's family burning in the flames, and Yaira is being forced to watch this, and she's freaking out. So all of this is revealed to be a nightmare that Yaira is having. So we see her waking up in her room, and she talks about how she's been having these nightmares every night since her battle against Yanessa and Yantoni and Magus, and how she can't tell that if there's any truth to these nightmares or if they're just visions of her imagination. So anyway, she ends up getting up and she goes in the other room and she finds the armor suit that she was given by Neptune at the end of Yaira 1 when he saved her from the volcano explosion. So she's got this armor in her home now, and she talks about how everyone thinks that Yaira died in that volcano incident. So they think Yaira is gone, but obviously she's still alive. She just assumed her Sally Rodell alias. And she talks about how this armor saved her life and is capable of being hidden on her form at all times. So basically she can have this armor and reveal it whenever she wants to. So after this, we do get a brief scene with Stefania where we see her still training with the Alpha Corps, since she is now a junior cadet with them. So she's still super pissed off at Yaira about her causing the death of her grandmother. So she's beating the shit out of this punching bag, and Ingrid Valdez ends up coming in, and they kind of get into an argument over it, since Ingrid is telling her that, she's not the only one with dead family members, which may be a hint at some of Ingrid's background there. But, they're kind of fussing over it, and Ingrid's trying to get Stefania to control herself. So Brian Solari ends up coming in and having a talk with Stefania too about having to, choose to live a life that would make the people that you lost proud. So we get a nice character moment between Brian and Stefania. So then we cut away to Spain, actually, where we see Dr. Sally Rodell along with Altona arriving off of a plane, and they are here to locate the lost city of Atlantis, since apparently the temple that Yaira woke up in at the end of the first book, it contains information on where Atlantis was, and she thinks that Neptune is there. So she presented the idea to Projexus, and of course they jumped on it. So they sent her to Projexus's Spain branch in order to find Atlantis, where we end up meeting Javier Cruz, who is the head of operations for Projexus Spain, and he is actually no fan of Sally Rodell, and claims that he's not going to be bewitched by her like Lincoln was back at the main Projexus headquarters. So they end up going in and are confronted by a bunch of reporters and press people, including Carrie Jones from the Atlantic Star, who is just tearing into Sally Rodell and calling her a promoter of pseudoscience and basically thinks she's full of shit. So they end up just kind of brushing the press people off and then going to this Projexus facility where they deploy a drone underwater to the coordinates that Sally Rodell has given them, and they end up successfully finding Atlantis. So, of course, this shocks the crowd that, something that's been hidden for so long was found so easily, but the great Sally Rodell has pulled it off. So then we cut away again to later that evening where we see Sally and Altona having dinner and talking about their discovery from that day. And in the middle of this, Sally ends up seeing one of those little beetle things that Magus Numite unleashed on the city in Yaira number 1. So she freaks out, and then suddenly there's a whole swarm of these things, and she turns around and there's a volcano erupting out of nowhere, and then Magus Numite appears. So, of course, she ends up waking up, and this is, of course, another one of her terrible nightmares like she's been having every night. So she ends up getting out of bed and wandering out onto the beach and actually just diving into the ocean and going down to Atlantis herself to investigate on her own. Which, through this, we do kind of learn that, Yaira's species, whatever alien race she is, actually can breathe underwater. So she dives down and investigates the ruins of Atlantis, where she ends up finding some paintings that sort of display the history, and she sees Neptune on one of these paintings along with his wife Cleito, and we learn that Neptune and Cleito actually had 5 sets of twin boys. So, boy, whatever race Yaira and them are, they're a fertile people. But anyway, they had all these sons who were meant to grow up to be these powerful kings and warriors, but obviously something happened and Atlantis fell into the ocean. So Yaira ends up swimming back to the surface, and when she gets there, she hears someone calling her name. And they're actually calling her by Yaira, not Sally. So she gets freaked out and wondering, who this is and how do they know who she really is. So she gets back to the beach, and it is revealed to be this guy named Yashua, who is one of Yaira's childhood friends from her home planet. So somehow this guy has actually made it to Earth as well. So they end up reconnecting, and, Yaira kind of catches him up on what's happened with Yanessa and her group being defeated, and her finding Neptune and all these things. And we also get a flashback to them when they were children, where Yaira is using her ice powers, even though apparently that's forbidden on their planet. And Yashua is trying to convince her not to do it, but of course Yaira isn't going to listen. So we get a glimpse of Yaira being a rebel even back then. So anyway, the next morning, Sally has secured a fake identity for Yashua under the name Joshua Von Wolf, who is supposed to be some master scuba diver. So she's going to take him as part of the team onto a Projexus submarine that is going to dive down and investigate the ruins of Atlantis. Meanwhile, Altona is off dealing with the press people, and she is confronted by this guy named Captain Osman, who is from the Royal Moroccan Navy, who is sort of complaining about, Projexus kind of coming in here and claiming ownership over Atlantis, even though, some of the surrounding countries or whatever would want to have ownership over it, and, sort of causing a fuss about that. But, of course, he also sort of immediately ends up hitting on Altona as well, so don't know how much of a threat this guy is going to be. So Sally and Joshua end up taking the Projexus submarine down to the ruins of Atlantis, and they go out using their scuba gear and stuff, even though they don't actually need it. It's just to keep their cover. So they go out to investigate, and they lost visual connection with the surface, but they still have audio with them, so they can talk to Altona on the surface, but Altona and them can't see anything. But anyway, they go down, and they immediately get attacked by a giant octopus, which damages some of their equipment, so they pretty much lose all contact with the surface at that point. But Yaira ends up freezing off one of the octopus's tentacles, so they manage to escape and it runs away. So they end up going into this room with these 10 statues in it as they're exploring the ruins, and they end up getting attacked again by this group of wraiths, who are these like knight-looking zombie guys. So they attack Yaira and Yashua, so they're trying to fight them off, and in the middle of this fight, they hear a voice calling out to them, begging them not to hurt these wraith things. And this voice is revealed to belong to Cleito, Neptune's wife. So she is somehow still alive after all this time. And she reveals that these wraiths that are attacking them are actually her and Neptune's sons. So the 10 sons that they had before have turned into these abominations now. And Cleito is claiming that, Neptune will kill them if they end up hurting their children. So in the middle of this, we get another flashback to Yaira and Yashua back on their home planet after they're grown up. And this is when Yaira is actually leaving the planet for the first time. And Yashua is like begging her not to go, but of course she ends up leaving anyway because she has to do what she's got to do. So anyway, we cut back to the fight, and as Yaira is blasting all these wraith things, it's not really doing any good because every time she blows one away, it just regenerates and comes right back. So this is a losing battle. But in the middle of this, we get an explanation from Cleito about what's going on here. So she tells the whole backstory of what happened when Neptune first landed on Earth. And he came down and landed on Atlantis, which apparently Atlantis was like already advanced in terms of technology and stuff before he got there. So it wasn't like just a regular island and then Neptune caused all the Legend of Atlantis stuff. Apparently they were already a pretty advanced people, to the point where the Atlantis people actually had a really long lifespan of like 800 years. But even with that, that's still comparatively shorter than the lifespans of, the alien race that Yaira and Neptune and them are. So Neptune was still bothered by this, that everything on Earth was so fleeting. So he ends up using some kind of dark magic to like sacrifice the souls of all of his sons in order to make Cleito immortal. So that's what caused his sons to turn into these, wraith abominations. So Neptune sort of ends up losing his mind, and he imprisons his now immortal wife in Atlantis, and forces his weird zombie children to guard her now. So this fight continues until Neptune actually starts to return. So Neptune himself is alive as well. So Yaira and Yashua end up hiding from him, while Cleito and Neptune sort of get into an argument where Cleito is talking about how she's stuck in a living hell now since Neptune made her immortal, and Neptune's trying to explain that he just did all this because he loves her, and of course Cleito is saying that, he only loves himself and he did this for selfish reasons. So they're having it out over that. So anyway, Neptune ends up leaving, and Yaira pursues him because, she's been looking for him for so long. So she chases after Neptune, but in the middle of this, she ends up getting attacked by more wraiths. But this time, it's not Neptune's sons, it's her former husband, Gorm, and all of their children. So they're all begging her for help, talking about how they're trapped here in this hell. And she ends up finding like their skeletons down on the ocean floor, and she's confused by how all this could be going on. And then of course she gets attacked by the swarm of beetles again. So at this point she kind of starts to realize that this is another one of her waking nightmares. So she comes to the conclusion that all these nightmares are being caused by Magus Numite. So she reveals the armor that Neptune gave to her, and she flies back to the surface, and she finds Magus Numite up there on the surface and engages in battle with him. Which, this isn't the real Magus Numite, of course, it's just another part of her illusion, part of her nightmare. So they're fighting on the surface, and Yaira is going completely nuts, and her attacks and stuff end up whooping up a giant storm over the ocean. So in the middle of all this, Yashua ends up surfacing too and trying to get Yaira under control, and is like yelling at her, what are you doing? And Yaira sort of snaps out of her nightmare and realizes that, she was fighting illusions all along, and, Numite wasn't actually there. So she has caused this giant storm that is now approaching the city. So all the people are fleeing this tidal wave, and we see Carrie Jones, giving a report on this, that Yaira is actually still alive, and she's attacking the city and causing the storm. So the world has discovered that Yaira does in fact live, and now they think she's a villain, and she's just attacking the city and causing the storm for no reason. So Yaira tries to actually save the city and get the storm under control, and in the middle of this, she's actually attacked by a battleship from one of the nearby countries. So she has to defend herself from that ship as well. So while all this is going on, we see Stefania watching all this on TV, the news reports. So she wants to immediately go after Yaira now that she knows that she's still alive. And Ingrid tries to stop her and get her under control. And Stefania actually ends up punching Ingrid through a wall and flying off anyway. So Stefania is super pissed and is going after Yaira no matter what. So anyway, back in Spain, Yaira does end up getting the storm under control and saves the city from being destroyed. But all the people are looking up at her, and she's trying to explain that, she's not here to be their enemy. But then in the middle of this, she gets attacked by a bunch of little mini Numites, basically. And she starts freaking out and trying to fight all of them. Which, again, these are, of course, just an illusion. So she is up in the sky just swatting at flies, basically. And everyone is recording her, and they all think that she's just completely gone insane and lost her mind. So not only does the world know that Yaira is still alive, they also think she's out of her mind and is just attacking people for no reason. And that is where this book ends. So yeah, overall I did love this story. It definitely went in a few ways that I wasn't expecting. I definitely wasn't anticipating Neptune to be this insane villain who has turned his wife into his immortal prisoner now. I did not see that coming. So I thought all the Neptune stuff was really interesting. The stuff with Cleito, the stuff with his sons, all that has a lot of really good future story potential. I really like Cleito's design too. I just thought she looked really cool. So all that is really interesting. I didn't expect another one of, Yaira's people to show up this soon either, with Yashua, especially with him, being an ally of Yaira's. If we did see another one of their race, I expected it to be someone else, trying to hunt down Yaira. So that was a surprise as well. It'll be interesting to see what they do with him now, since presumably, he has all the same powers that Yaira does. So are they going to get him involved as some sort of hero role or potentially a villain role at some point, maybe? So that'd be interesting to see too. Now, on the Stefania side, we didn't get much from her in this book. I would like to have gotten a little bit more on her story. Obviously, they're setting up a confrontation between her and Yaira for Yaira number 3, with Stefania flying off to hunt her down at the end of this book. So I expect to get more of that in the future, but yeah, that is something we're just going to have to wait for. But overall, I think the plot did move along really nicely in this book. The whole story element with the nightmares being possibly caused by Magus Numite. I'm intrigued to see where they go with that. They talked about Numite's astral self causing this or something, and I don't really know what that's supposed to mean. The way Numite died in Yaira number 1, I don't think there's a way that you could just say oh, he survived. Because that was a pretty gruesome death. But, he is this magic, dark sorcerer guy, so, with magic involved, pretty much anything can happen. But it sounds like at least his physical body is dead, but maybe he exists on some sort of spiritual plane or magic dimension or something. We'll see where they go with that. But I do hope they eventually do a more clear explanation for exactly how Numite is still alive, if he is still alive, instead of just, hand-waving it with, magic hoodoo bullshit. So I hope we get a detailed explanation of exactly how that works out, if they do end up having him be alive somehow. Which, I have no problem with him being alive, because I love his design, and I think, killing him off that soon really would be a waste. So, I'm fine with the idea of him being alive. I just hope it's explained thoroughly in the future, and isn't left with some, vague magic nonsense explanation. But yeah, ultimately I was satisfied with this book, and I am definitely looking forward to Yaira number 3, which I do already have pre-ordered. So I will be going through that book as well when I get a hold of it. As for my recommendation, I can recommend this book if you like the first one. Obviously, this is number 2, so I wouldn't start with this one. You know, if you didn't read Yaira number 1, definitely pick it up first before this one. But if you read the first book and you enjoyed it, this is a continuation of it that I think you'll definitely get a kick out of as well. So, really like this book, looking forward to the future. Now, as for what my next Rippaverse video is going to be, I do have Zaylin ISO number 3 and Great War of Separation number 2 all pre-ordered together in one order. And that order has not shipped yet because I think Great War of Separation number 2 just had a slight delay in it. So I know Zaylin is already in some people's hands, and have they started shipping ISO 3 yet? I don't even know. I can't keep up. They got so many releases going on. But yeah, I gotta wait for Great War number 2 before that order ships for me personally. So I don't know exactly when I'm gonna get my hands on those. And then God knows when I'll actually get to read them once I do get a hold of them, because, you know, I've had these books for a while. But yeah, as soon as I get a hold of them and have time to actually read the damn things, I will be covering all of those books as well. So, don't know exactly when that'll be, but you do have that future Rippaverse content to look forward to at some indeterminate point in the future. But anyway, I guess that's all I got to say, so lots of luck to you and yours.